Part 3. You will hear Jack and Emma discuss their field trip to observe wild dolphins, covering the logistics, the dolphins' feeding habits, and their interactions with humans. First, you'll have some time to look at questions 21 to 16. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 16.
Hi Emma, how was your field trip?
Great. Thanks, Jack. I'm glad we decided to go.
Remind me, where did you go?
To the coast to see wild dolphins.
Wow, that sounds really interesting. What did you do?
We watched them for a couple of days and we did some filming. I've got a video of them, if you'd like to see it.
Sure, I'd love...
Okay, I'll show you tomorrow. I'm just going to look through my notes for a moment. I've got a tutorial coming up. I need to make sure I'm well prepared for it.
So what are you going to talk about in the tutorial?
Well, I'm going to talk about the aims of the trip. There were two main aims.
Okay.
The first one was to see how dolphins behave in the wild. We all know about their intelligence and their ability to communicate and so on, but we wanted to see what they actually do.
I see. And what was the second aim?
The second aim was to see the dolphins in their natural habitat and to see how they interact with the environment.
Okay. And what did you find out?
Well, we found out a lot about the dolphins and their behaviour. We saw them feeding, for example.
Right. And what did you learn about that?
Well, they were feeding on a type of fish called mullet. They work as a team to catch them. They chase the fish into shallow water where they're easy to catch. They do this over and over again until they've eaten enough.
I see. So what do they do when they're not feeding?
Well, they spend a lot of time playing. They play with each other, and they also play with objects. They often pick up a piece of seaweed and then drop it and catch it again. It's like a game to them.
That's interesting.
Yes, it is. And they also play with us. When we were in the boat, they came up to us and swam around us. They seemed to be having fun.
Did you get to touch them?
No, we didn't. We were told not to touch them because they're wild animals and they might bite. But they came very close to us and we could see them really well.
What else did you find out?
Well, we saw how they communicate with each other. They make a lot of different sounds, and they also use body language. They move their heads and tails to show how they're feeling.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you'll have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
That's fascinating.
Yes, it is. And we also saw how they interact with other animals. There were some birds that were feeding on the same fish as the dolphins. The dolphins didn't seem to mind. They just ignored the birds and carried on feeding.
That's interesting. Did you see any other animals?
Yes, we did. We saw some sea turtles, and we also saw a shark. The dolphins didn't seem to be afraid of the shark. They just swam around it.
That's amazing.
Yes, it was. And we also saw how the dolphins interact with humans. They seem to be very curious about us. They come up to boats and swim around them. They seem to be interested in what we're doing.
That's fascinating. So, what are you going to talk about in your tutorial?
Well, I'm going to talk about the dolphins and their behaviour, and I'm also going to talk about the environment and how it affects the dolphins.
That sounds really interesting. I'd love to hear more about it.
Okay, I'll tell you more about it tomorrow. I need to go now. I've got a lecture in 10 minutes.
Okay, see you tomorrow.
That is the end of part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to part 3.